everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Digital Fashion Week, a masterclass. Today we have how to create a wearable in Decentraland. This is courtesy of a partnership with Decentraland. We are going to have a competition. We have a competition that's open right now for independent fashion designers to bring your 3D models, your designs, and a parallel wearable as well. So we can show it in the Decentraland showroom and also for virtual try on at our events in September. So I'm really excited. We have here today KJ Walker, the founder of Low Poly Models, who is an expert in creating low poly models and is going to walk us through this. So just a little housekeeping. We're really super excited to see you all here, and I think people are going to have some questions as we go along. What we're going to do is KJ has a presentation and she's going to go through that, and then let's answer questions all together at the end. So if you feel your question isn't being answered, it is going to be answered in time when we can just address everybody's issues. So I'm going to turn my camera off. KJ, over to you.
Very good. Let me get this slideshow running. Share screen. There we go. Okay. Visuals okay for now? I'm going to take that as
Yep,
yes.
we can see you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much for coming to this class. And thank you so much to Claire and the foundation for hosting and creating this opportunity. It really means a lot. So I'm going to assume most people here already have quite a lot of experience in 3D designing and in texturing. So let's focus on this presentation more on the platform requirements that we have specifically in Decentraland, because as you know, each platform tends to work a little bit differently, and that way you can adapt all of your designs to whichever platform you want to upload them with. So let's get started. This is an overview of the Decentraland avatar, and I like to think of it as like an action figure made up of different Lego parts. And all those different Lego parts connect together, just like you'd see with Lego in real life. And that's what allows a great amount of flexibility and creativity within quite a structured series of limitations, which we're going to go through today. So in the diagram here, you can see the avatar split into different parts. And also I have a fly with me today. So we have the head as a whole separate entity, and you could create a head wearable. And also within the head, there are different categories, which like the eyebrows, the eyes, the mouth. You can also do hair and facial hair. So those are all some categories. And then we also have the upper body or the torso, which is another Lego piece, so to say. And our hands connect onto our torso as separate Lego pieces as well. And with the lower body, we have a very similar setup in that from the hips down is a separate piece. And then from the ankles down to the feet is another separate piece. So all of these different pieces are things that you could create wearables for. And the fact that they all snap together, which we will look at more in depth very soon, is what allows different people to be able to combine different wearables in whichever way they want, which gives a lot of freedom and opens up the expression of digital identity, which is quite a big topic for all of us, I guess. And yeah, let me talk about the connection points, which are how our Lego pieces are going to work. So you should be able to see my mouth here between the arm and between the hands. You'll see that there is a little separation. Now, that separation is there just for the purpose of this graphic. You won't see it in real life. But what we have there is a loop at the end of the forearm where the wrist is, and another loop where the hand starts at the wrist. And those two loops connect together perfectly, like creating a little puzzle piece, if you will. But very simple, it's just a circular loop of vertices. So what you can do as a designer is create pretty much anything that you want to create and always keep those connection points, those loops in the same place. And that will allow different wearables to be able to be combined seamlessly with whatever you create. So this might seem a bit confusing in the beginning, but it should make a lot more sense as we move on. So those key connection points, we're going to find them between the base of the neck and the start of the upper body, kind of where your collarbones and the base of your neck would be. Another one where the wrists are, and there's another one around the hips. And the last one is where our ankles would be. So that's, of course, going to allow us to have different footwear depending on how we're feeling. I usually like to wear slippers in Decentraland, but I know a lot of people also like to wear high heels or bare feet or anything like that. And it is a really great system because it allows people to really switch things up and wear exactly what they want to wear. So let's have a look at what that means for you as a designer. So we talked about how the body works and how it is like different Lego parts that are connected to one another. And that is the way it is. However, we do have two different body shapes to account for. They're generally referred to as body shape A and body shape B. And they are very similar, but there are some key differences, especially in the height of the connection points around the hips. So you'll find on one of the avatars, it is quite a lot higher than it is on the other avatar. And this is actually quite an important concept. And I'd like to try and explain it by asking you to think of a real world t-shirt. So you could wear this t-shirt. You could lend it to a friend and they could wear it. You could also lend it to someone who has a very different body type to you, and they could still wear it because it's a fabric that stretches. And if it doesn't stretch enough, you could cut it, you could rip it, you could Velcro it. There's all sorts you could do. But that's in real life. In Decentraland, it's very different. So each wearable item needs to perfectly fit the slot. In other words, if you create a t-shirt for body shape A as a digital avatar, it's not going to work on body shape B. So you're going to need to create a variation for body shape B. However, you don't always need to do that. As a designer, you have full choice over what you want to do. So you could build just for body shape A, or you could build just for body shape B, or you can build for both. Bearing in mind that that requires doing a little bit of extra work and creating another variant of your design that has the loop, the hips loop, at the right place for that body shape. So this is something you will see quite often on the marketplace. If you like buying wearables and you like shopping, you'll see in the thumbnails, we often have two different body shape representations of the same item. And this is just to let people know that both body shapes are available. But there are also some very interesting cases where people get quite creative with this. For instance, the baby dolls created a wearable for prom in Decentraland, and the body shape A was a long dress, and the body shape B was a tuxedo. So it was two completely different styles of wearable, but put into one same wearable, if that makes sense. So depending on which body shape you are using as an avatar, You would either show wearing a dress or you would show wearing a tuxedo, but it is just one wearable that you needed to purchase. So most customers, most consumers tend to prefer having the ability to wear it on both body shapes. But again, as a designer, that is completely your decision, and you know that's your domain to decide whatever you think is best for your design. Next, this looks a little bit text heavy, but it's actually not so bad. I'm going to walk you through it. So when we talk about Decentraland and when we talk about wearables, we need to think about performance and optimization, which any of you who are familiar with programming and computers probably know just how important this is, especially for a system like Decentraland, where the goal is to have a massive place with tons and tons of people loaded in at the same time, and everyone should run smoothly and have good performance. So to make sure that that happens, for most wearables, we have a maximum of 1,500 triangles, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but you would be surprised at what people can actually do with that few triangles. Then for accessories, things like facial hair, earrings, sunglasses, we have a maximum of 500 triangles per wearable. And then we have the case of hands, which are a little bit different for two reasons. One, because they were added in later on community request. Many people wanted to be able to customize their hands, and the foundation made that possible, which is great. And also, if you know hands, which you must do if you're a designer, you need hands. Hands have a lot of bones, they have a lot of joints and a lot of moving parts. And for that to work, we need to have a lot of loops and a lot of geometry. So the basic budget for hand wearables is 1,500 triangles if they replace the actual avatar hand. If they don't replace the avatar hand, then you can use up to 1,000 triangles. Now, triangles to one side. You can find all this on the Decentraland documentation, by the way, and I would recommend always checking it before you start making a new wearable. Next, we have the textures. So for each wearable, regardless of whether it's a regular wearable or an accessory or a hand wearable, we have a maximum of 2 textures per item. So textures are quite simply images that we plug in to our Blender nodes, which we will get to in a second. And they are what can give us patterns and different designs on a wearable that are beyond the geometry and just simple colors. We can also use a maximum of 2 materials without counting the skin material of the avatar, which you can find at the end of the presentation in some links to different resources where you'll find the base avatar, which we looked at previously, and also some reference wearables to give you a better idea of how that actually looks in real life. Now, if you're anything like me, you might be confused at the difference between a material and a texture. I was for a very long time, until someone explained it to me in a way that eventually made sense. So I'm going to try and do that for you guys today. So a material is like a container that has properties regarding color, glow, alpha for your wearable. And a texture is something you can put inside that container, but you don't have to, and you don't always. Therefore, what's the long and short of this? Is you can have maximum 2 materials for your wearable. And if those materials have textures in them as well, then that counts as your 2 textures. You can duplicate a texture and use it more than once in the same material And as long as it is exactly the same texture, that doesn't count as an extra texture. I hope that makes sense. Again, this is covered quite clearly in the documentation, but it's the kind of thing that sometimes you need to read it a couple of times for it to fully make sense. And yeah, I'm a little nervous, so I might not be doing the best job explaining things. Finally, we have the case of skin wearables, which if I go back a second to the main avatar, a skin wearable would be a wearable that covers the entire avatar from their head down to their toes. So it includes every single category that we have here on the screen. Seeing as that's a lot more to deal with, a lot more geometry, in those cases, you can use up to 5,000 triangles and 5 textures, again, without including the skin material. So something I get asked quite a lot in terms of materials and textures is how do people make their wearables look so great with so few textures and so few triangles? And it's actually quite a simple answer, and you just want to bake your wearable, maybe from a high poly version to a low poly version, or maybe you want to bake in some specific texture maps and then have them flat on one image. Regardless, baking is a really great approach to getting a lot more detail into your model without using more data. And this may sound a little intimidating if you're not familiar with baking, but I do have a link to an overview of the process at the end of the presentation, which I would definitely recommend you checking out if you're at all interested. Last but not least, what software should you use, right? As a designer, I'm sure you already have your preferred workflow, your preferred software, and I don't want to mess with that. Each person has their own way of doing things. But when it comes to weight painting and exporting your wearable, I would highly recommend that you do that part from Blender, because all of the Decentraland documentation is created with Blender in mind, and the wearable system was also created with Blender in mind. So you can use any program to create the wearables, but I would always recommend doing the skinning process and the export process from Blender just to avoid any problems further down the line. Now, how big can you make your wearable? This is something a few people have tried to do, making bigger and bigger wearables each time, which is very interesting to see. And we do now have a constraint for the maximum size that your wearable can be. And we have that on the screen here, outlined with an orange box and with the measurements up at the top. In terms of how small your wearable can be, you do have quite a lot of freedom. However, your body parts must always match up with the skeleton of the avatar, which we will call the armature. So as long as your hands are in the right place and your feet are in the right place, you can pretty much do anything you like. I've seen some very cool wearables that are skeletons, for instance, or with different kind of floating body parts. And all of that is very possible and causes no problems. Just make sure that you do have each body part in the place where the skeleton expects it to be, so that everything moves nicely as you would like it to. Now let's talk about materials. So on the right-hand side of the screen here, if you're a Blender user, you will be very familiar with this. It's a principled BSDF node, and it's what or what I advise using to give your wearables materials, textures, colors, and all that good stuff. So don't worry about all the different connection points here on the screen. Just worry about the ones that are highlighted in red. So number one, the base color. is just the simple color for whenever you're making. So if it's a red t-shirt, it would be red. However, if you wanted to make a red polka dot t-shirt, maybe you would have a texture plugged in there that is red with polka dots on it. Following that, we have number 2, which is emission. So in there, you can plug in any maps to make different areas of your wearable glow if you want them to glow. And you can also control how much they glow and in which color using either your image map or the black color here next to the emission. And number 3, we also have alpha. So you can plug in a black and white alpha map into your texture, and that can give you some very interesting effects if you're looking for something a little bit more futuristic or experimental. Now, what about the other maps that as designers we really like to use, like normal maps and roughness maps? Well, unfortunately, they are not exactly compatible with Decentraland wearables, but there are some very good workarounds. And the main one would again be to bake those maps onto your other texture maps. So if you have a normal map, you could bake that onto your base color map and eradicate the need to have a separate normal map. And I can already tell someone's there thinking, I'm going to stick a normal map in there anyway, because I would do that. So no judgment. But if you do, it is not going to make any difference to the visual appearance of your wearable. And it is going to push you over your material limits, which will likely mean that your wearable will not be accepted and you will need to make some minor adjustments to get it accepted. So no normal maps, no roughness maps, nothing like that. But by all means, bake that stuff into your base color, into your emission, and into your alpha. At the bottom of the page here, we have a little link to Blender manual with a guide to baking in cycles. And yes, I would definitely recommend checking that out if you're curious and you're not entirely sure how the process works. There's always more to learn. Now, let's talk about the armature. So the armature is very much like the skeleton, and this is the same for every single wearable in Decentraland, regardless of whether it's body shape A or body shape B. And there are only a couple of things to bear in mind when it comes to the armature. Well, 3. Let's start with the first one, as where to find it. And I will add a link at the end of the presentation to a Google Drive folder hosted by the Decentraland Foundation, where you can find all of these source files and also wearable reference models. You can also find links to all of that from the Decentraland docs if you want to go straight there instead. Now, when you open up that Google Drive folder, you'll find the armature in 2 different formats. One of them is FBX and one of them is GLB or GLTF. So if you decide to use an FBX, when you import it into Blender, it's very important that you check here to ignore leaf bones. Now, this has caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people in the past. So just make sure to ignore leaf bones if you are importing the armature in FBX. Or you can bypass that completely and just import it as a GLB or a GLTF and not need to worry about leaf bones. And, oops, sorry. The other very important thing to bear in mind is I want you to think of the armature here as kind of like a sacred object of sorts, in that you don't want to touch it, okay? If you touch it, it will cause problems, mostly for yourself and many, many headaches. So we have a series of settings to the side here, and it is just highly recommended to not touch any of these to not move the armature around in the scene or anything like that, because then when you export, it becomes a real headache because the wearable starts doing very strange things, and the root cause is almost always the armature. So you can still move and use the armature as much as you want. Just make sure always to do it in pose mode and never in edit mode. I hope that makes sense. So basically just don't touch the armature except for your weight painting and your skinning. Moving on, let's take a closer look at weight painting and skinning, which are the same thing. It's the same thing, just two different words. And in the second image here on the bottom, you'll see we have some little green loops around the base of the neck here, where the collar starts, and again around the base of the head. So this is an example of two different Lego parts and how they would then snap together. So each of these vertexes perfectly lines up with the part underneath it. And to make sure that they always stick together and never come apart and never break, regardless of whatever movements or dances or jumping that your avatar may be doing, what you want to do is to weight paint those connection points, those vertices, 100% to the key bone that is controlling them. So in this case, because we're looking at the neck connection points, we want to fully weight all of this to the neck bone, which is this one here. And we do exactly the same on the head for this bottom set of vertices. This is extremely important to do. And not only do you want to make sure it's fully weight painted to the key bone on either end, you do also want to double check that you don't have any influence from any other bones, because that will lead to some kind of separation and a little bit of disconnect. So you want that part of your weight painting to be very, very clean and quite computer minded. It's like 100% weighted to the neck bone, absolutely nothing else. That sounds very strict, and it is, but we do actually have a lot of freedom with our weight painting and skinning as well. So for instance, if you wanted to make a hat or a head accessory that had some ears on the top of it, you could weight paint the ears on the top to move with the hand bones or the finger bones very gently, and then you could have kind of an effect of ears wiggling. So it's a very interesting situation of working within the requirements and the limits of the platform, but while also being creative and thinking outside of the box. Now, let's take a quick look at topology, which is something I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. But this is topology that is specific for low poly models and getting our ideal bends and movements around our joints. So this is not something that you have to do whatsoever. It is completely your choice. This is just a recommended approach if you want things like knees and elbows to bend naturally like they would in real life. So furthest on the left here, we have an ideal scenario of very few loops, but we've just got a little cut here behind the knee, which allows for a really nice bending shape. Next to that in the middle, we have another scenario, which is good, but it could be better. And then we have the not optimal solution, where it is bending, but it's not bending like a joint would bend. Now, as a designer, sometimes you're going to want one thing and sometimes you're going to want another thing. And that is absolutely fine. That's your decision as a designer. This is just if you start to get to the point where you're pulling your hair out saying, why aren't my knees bending the way I want them to bend? Take a look at this topology. and take a look at the weight painting next to it and try and match it as closely as you can. And you will end up with some really nice natural looking bends. And again, nothing wrong with using the non-optimal form. It is completely up to you, and it completely depends on what you're creating and what you're trying to express with what you're creating. Next, let's talk about exporting your wearables, which is actually pretty simple. All you need to do is select the wearable first, and then select the armature second. So you should see the skeleton always with a yellow outline, and make sure you don't have anything else selected in there as well, which could cause problems later on. And then you just want to go to File, Export, and export as GLTF or GLB, and with the following settings. So you want to include selected objects. You want the transform to be plus Y up. In the geometry, you want to include just UVs, normals, and vertex colors. And in the animation settings, you just want to include skinning. And with all of these things checked and having selected your wearable and your armature in the correct order, you can then export the GLTF and it should work just fine, no problems. So once you have your exported wearable, the first thing you're going to want to do is test it out and see what it looks like on an avatar and move around with it and see what you might want to adjust. So let's look at that process. First of all, you want to go to the Decentraland builder, which I have linked up at the top here, and you want to go to the collections page. From the collections page, you want to create a new collection, this nice big button here. And when you click that, it will prompt you to name your collection. And then once you've named it, you can click on add a new item. And that will open up a window just like this, where you can drag and drop the asset that you just exported. Again, in GLTF or GLB format. Once you have dropped it in there, you will see this flow of windows where there are some different settings that we can configure and adapt so that our wearable works just how we want it to. So first of all, we need to tell the engine which body shape we're working with. So whatever you designed, whether it's for body shape A or body shape B, you just need to tell the engine up here at the top. Next, you're going to enter a name and you're going to decide on the rarity that you want for your wearable. So wearables in Decentraland are NFTs, so limited edition collectibles. And you, as the creator, have the option to define how many of them can ever exist. You'll find some very good lists on the Decentraland docs with the name of each rarity tier and how many wearables that actually means. So in this example, we have epic, and epic means 1,000 copies maximum can ever exist of this wearable. Lastly, you need to tell the engine what wearable category your wearable is. So in this example, it is an upper body. And last, and completely optional, you don't need to do this, but you can if you want. You have a little camera icon here on the thumbnail, which you can click and upload a custom thumbnail if you would prefer. Your custom thumbnail needs to be a PNG file with a transparent background. And it's recommended that it's a maximum of 512 by 512 pixels, but you can get away with 1024 by 1024, but you didn't hear that from me. Once you have done this, you will click Create, which will then open up these windows. This is called the preview. So this is like an isolated environment where you can just test your wearable. But more than that, there are some very important settings on the right-hand side, which you can configure, and I would definitely recommend taking a close look at before you upload anything. So next to the first arrow, you can add in a little description about your wearable. Further down, we have a section called overrides. Now, this might seem a bit confusing, but let me give you an example that should help it make sense. If you design a baseball cap, for instance, you will more than likely design some custom hair to go underneath it, because if not, you're going to have a very strange clipping situation with the hair and the hat. So it's going to be better for you to add custom hair to the hat. And if you do that, when you have an avatar put the hat on, you want to also remove any hair that they were wearing before so that it is replaced by the custom hair that you added to the hat. This sounds very wordy and very complicated, but in my brain it's very simple, and I hope it's coming across more simply. So overrides is just to cancel out any other wearable that your wearable needs to cancel out. Under that, you have tags, which you can add in for searchability, just like you would with any social media platform or something like that. And then underneath, we have a very interesting setting called Allow VRM Export. Now, this is quite a controversial thing for designers, which is why you can toggle it on or off. Essentially, if this is enabled, anyone who purchases your wearable will be able to download it in VRM formats and use that VRM on other platforms, on streaming, on wherever they want. And it's your choice as a creator whether or not you allow that for your wearable. So the default is enabled. If you don't want that behavior, all you need to do is toggle this button here and turn it off, enabled. And last, along here, we have is outline compatible. Now, if you have ever been into the Decentraland client, you'll see that all wearables have a really nice, gentle toon shader, like a black outline around them. And it looks great, in my opinion. However, in some cases, that might not be what you want for your wearable. So you do have the option to disable that black outline just here. So again, the default is to have it on, and if you would rather have it turned off, you can turn it off just here. Next, we were talking in the first slide about how you can choose whether to build for body shape A or body shape B or both. And if you are doing both, then you will follow this upload process that we have been through so far. And you just want to add one more step, which is to click on these three dots up here, and it will give you an option to add the other body shape representation. And you can upload it just like we did here. It's a very similar process, but this will connect it to this one wearable so that anyone who purchases this item has both a body shape A representation and a body shape B representation. Once you've done that, you can go back to the collection page and you can click on this magic button called See in World. This will allow you to load straight into Decentraland and actually run about and do all different kinds of animations and really stress test your wearable to make sure that it's working just the way you want it to. So once you click here on See in World, you will see this first window pop up, which gives you two options. You can either jump into an empty parcel, which is going to load a bit faster, or you can load into Genesis Plaza for the authentic experience, completely up to you, no difference to your wearables or testing. Regardless of which one you click, you're then going to come across this next window here, where your digital wallet, your MetaMask, is going to get a bit cross with you and say, hey, you need to come off the Ethereum mainnet and you need to change to a test network. So always stay up to date with the documentation because sometimes the test network changes. But at the moment, we're using Girly. And yeah, so you just want to click in your MetaMask and change from Ethereum mainnet to Girly. And then the page should load just fine. And you will have a situation like this bottom picture here, where your avatar has loaded into the world. And from there, you can run around and do emotes and all that good stuff. Now, when you load in, you're not necessarily going to be wearing the item that you want to be wearing. So there is a quick little shortcut, and you can press I for inventory, and that will open up your backpack. And in there, you can click on the wearable that you want to wear, and then click done. And then you'll come back to this screen, and it will have refreshed, and you'll be wearing the wearable that you selected. And then you really can run around and fully test it. Next, let's talk a little bit about money, because no one likes to talk about money, but at the end of the day, if you're a designer, it's a job and you have bills to pay, so we gotta talk about money. So you can sell your wearables for whatever price you want to. You can also change the price over time. That is completely up to you. You are fully in charge of that. Bear in mind that whatever price that you set, you will get about 98.5% of that directly. The rest goes towards the DAO, which kind of keeps the servers running and all of that. But you are only going to lose between 1 and 2%, which is very good compared to other platforms. So you can set whichever price that you want. You can sell for whichever price you want. And you can also direct those funds to come into whichever digital wallet you want them to. So by default, they will go to the wallet that you are logged in with as a creator. But if you want to change that, you can uncheck this little thing down here that says I'm the beneficiary, and you can insert any other Ethereum address, which is excellent when you're working with clients, when you're working with charities, or maybe if you want to direct funds into a code wallet or anything like that. Once you have configured all of these things and had your wearable approved by the curation committee, which we will get to in just a second, you can then click up here to enable sales, and that will list your wearable on the marketplace. And like with everything in Decentraland, you do have quite a lot of freedom and you are in charge. So you can put it on the market at any time. You can take it off the market at any time, and on and on and on. So you could have it appear every Tuesday for half an hour if you wanted to, whatever you want as a designer. Now let's talk about the other part of the money. So you do have to pay a submission fee to publish wearables in Decentraland. And I know what you're thinking, none of us love this, but it does help keep wearables scarce and valuable on the marketplace. And those funds go towards the server costs and the DAO, and also the curation committee, who is a body of people whose job it is to review all of the wearables that get published and make sure that they're okay for the platform. So what the curation committee check is two things, essentially. One, that everything works and is compliant with the requirements that I've just walked you through. So your maximum triangles, your maximum materials, your size, all of that stuff. And then on the other hand, they need to check that your content, your design is compliant with the content policy of Decentraland. Now, it is a very lenient content policy. It is very open. You can publish almost anything, but there are just a few no-nos, which I'm sure no one here would even consider. But it is good just to put it out there so that people know in advance. And there are basically three things that are categoric no-nos in the content policy. And that is, first of all, hate speech towards anyone or any community of people. Secondly, encouraging violence or promoting violence. You can by all means have like play weapons on your item and whatnot, but you couldn't have, for instance, a t-shirt that was included text that directly encouraged people to do violent things. And last but not least, we cannot have, unfortunately, full frontal nudity. You can show a lot, but you do have to just cover the private parts. There is very funny wearable, which I really wish I knew off the top of my head who created it. But it is a naked avatar with just little black censored bars over the more delicate areas. So that's as far as you can go, basically, to give you an idea. Aside from that, you can do pretty much everything. Do just bear in mind that in terms of horror and gore, if you want to go down that route, you absolutely can. Just don't make it too scary because we do still want young teens on the platform as well. So quite gory, it's fine. Super gory, try and take it down a notch just so it's something you'd feel comfortable showing to a 13-year-old. And one last thing I wanted to mention, and which Claire also mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, is there is currently a competition going on, and these are things that do happen from time to time. So if you don't want to pay the $100 in mana submission fee for your wearable, which is very understandable, just wait for a competition or use now as your stepping stone to get into it. And you can publish and you can get that fee directly refunded to you by the foundation, which is a really great initiative. And of course, you still keep all proceeds from any sales that you make. It's just that publishing fee that is going to be covered by the foundation when they have these specific competitions and events. Here is the page with the links and the resources that I mentioned. I will make sure or try and make sure these get linked in down below in the description so you have easier access to them. And the last slide, I just want to give you a few words of encouragement and advice. Whenever you're trying something new, it can be very frustrating. There can be times where you feel like you're pulling your hair out. But I want you to know that all of this is absolutely possible, even with zero knowledge of absolutely anything. And if you are feeling a little bit frustrated, do remember that there is excellent documentation available online in the Decentraland docs. And there is also a very warm, welcoming, and helpful community of people in Decentraland who are more than happy to help anyone with any trouble or any questions that they may have. So by all means, feel free to reach out to people and ask questions, and everyone is going to want to help see you win. So don't be shy, and remember you can figure it out. And I'll pass it back to you, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, KJ. That was just really, really amazing. So detailed, so thorough. Um, I wish you could see the chat. There's a lot of fan support for you here.
Oh,
Yeah, and going back and everyone's saying that they couldn't have got started without your knowledge and your advice. So, yeah, I just really want to acknowledge how grateful we are that you're here. And also thank you so much to Decentraland for making this possible. As everybody knows, we have a Decentraland competition going on at the moment, and that's the reason for creating this masterclass as well, to help everybody with their entries. And it's information that we want to share anyway. But KJ, we have a couple of questions. Um, what's really amazing is we have such a great support group here as well, and people have been answering some of these questions for each other and sharing information. Most of the questions are really around the what platforms to use for designing. You talked about Blender and Tang and Thomas and other people have been really backing you up on that. But what are your thoughts on Blender versus Maya? I don't want to say one against another, but what is the best platform and what are your recommendations with or for how to use other platforms?
I would definitely say to use whichever platform you are most comfortable with. So on a person-to-person basis. If you've, learned how to use Maya, by all means continue using Maya. Just bear in mind that when it comes to Decentraland things, it has been kind of created with Blender in mind. So it might be a little bit trickier to find out the exact information you need. You can use any software you want. It will just be a little bit easier for you to use Blender, especially for weight painting and for exporting wearables.
And Blender is free and open source as well.
It is,
So
it is. So
yeah,
it's accessible to everyone.
right. So that makes it really, really great for anybody who's just getting started. Um, So, other questions are about getting more training. And I know you shared some resources with us here, and I'm going to make sure that those resources are in the description so that people can really easily go back and use them again. But what are your thoughts about where people can get training?
It depends very much on the person and what kind of training that they're looking for. If it's a specific creating wearables for Decentraland, a few years ago, I made like a series of videos delving into each category and different things that you can do. They're not the best videos, but I'm I hope that they have helped some people along their way. So if anyone wants to check those out, you can find them on a channel called Low Poly Models World. And aside from that, I would say either look in the Decentraland documentation if it's DCL specific, and if not, search YouTube. It's your best friend. There are so many helpful people out there. You can find a lot of answers to your questions.
So Tang Poco very kindly put the just your handle, low poly models, in the chat here. So is that for YouTube or where is the best way for people to see other tutorials that you've done as well?
Let me drop a link to yeah, I think Tangy, sorry, I can't keep track of everything at the same time. So our YouTube handle is at low poly models with a W on the end. And if you go there, you will find all of these videos that I'm mentioning.
Fantastic. And yeah, Tang put that in the chat as
Tangy.
well. Amazing. I'm just trying to see. I don't think we've got any other really, really specific questions. They were very much about, what platform to use. Does anyone have any questions? It was such a detailed, amazing presentation, KJ, that I
Gosh.
think you really took us through these steps, everything from your initial ideas and how to start all the way down to how to upload it and get it working in Decentraland. Do we have any last questions? I don't see that we do. So, so I have one last question I was going to ask you at the beginning was how did you get started with creating low poly models for Decentraland?
Right. Of course, of course. For me, it was quite an unusual situation. I like to think it was a little bit meant to be. It was quite a serendipitous kind of thing. So I have a background in art and in painting, and became very enamored with a subject called art and technology, where we started learning about Blender and 3D modeling. And it just really sparked an interest in me of what all of that could be. But I kind of parked that to one side, and a few years later, I walked into a coffee shop in Spain and I met a man who was at the time the creative director for Decentraland. I had no idea what Decentraland was, and we just got talking, and it turns out they were looking for 3D modelers, and I absolutely fell in love with the projects. And that is kind of where everything started. And coincidentally enough, the person who I met in the coffee shop is actually from the same teensy tiny village in England as I am, but we met in Spain in another teensy tiny place. So it was very much meant to be.
That's amazing. What a beautiful story. So we have one more question from Thomas, who is asking, when is the next KJ wearable coming out?
Oh gosh, Thomas. um, hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. We will, yeah, I will get back to you on that one.
Oh, and we have one more question. So this is more for Decentraland, is can we publish the skin for free as part of the competition? So how it's going to work with the competition is you're going to submit your designs and we're going to have a team who's going to select four winners. Decentraland is building us a permanent showroom, which we're really, really excited about. So we'll be able to bring new designers for new events into this showroom. So these designs will be free. Um, but you'll also be sharing your 3D models as well that you've designed in Clo or something else as well that we're going to have in virtual try on IRL. So yeah, and we can always answer these questions. Just reach out and connect with us at any time. But KJ, thank you so much. This was just really, really fabulous. We will put a reminder to everybody for your connections in the description so that people can follow you and follow your tutorials and find out more. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. This has been really amazing and great to get to know you and get to know your community. And a big thank you to the Decentraland Foundation, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Decentraland. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.